Ma'am, should I start? I think we're at 6:15. I think we can start. Okay. Thank you, all of you. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Arvind, and I'm extremely delighted to welcome all of you to the fourth webinar as part of our Right to Information series called Conversations on RTI, which is being anchored by Shailesh Gandhi, sir, who's a very well-known activist, an RTI evangelist, and a former Central Information Commissioner himself. The cherry on the cake is that we are also extremely happy to have with us Yogendra Yadav, sir, who is one of India's leading psephologists, a political activist, founder, president of Swaraj Abhiyan, and an anti-corruption crusader. He's been instrumental in some of our country's leading movements, been part of a lot of think tanks, and has done a lot of work, which we'll hopefully get to hear from sir himself. So allow me to take this chance to thank both Shailesh sir and Yogendra sir for joining us today. For those of you who are new to us, Moneylife Foundation is a not-for-profit organization that primarily engages in spreading financial literacy and advocacy for savers. Our RTI Center, which is being supported by the Thakur Foundation, has been doing its best to promote the use of RTI in various ways, including the RTI Advice app, which now allows you to ask questions on RTI to a panel of experts in any language by text, audio, or video. My colleague Akshay will post a link to the same in the chat in case you wish to download. So do have a look at that and make the most of it. Before we officially begin, there are a couple of rules that I'm going to share for the benefit of all of us. We have kept all of you on mute during the session so that our focus is entirely on the speakers and we're able to hear them properly. We will unmute you during the Q&A. For optimal viewing, I'm going to request you to keep the webinar on speaker view. This meeting is being recorded, and a copy of this will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, Moneylife TV. So in case you wish to refer back, you can always do that. During the question and answer session, I'm going to request you to use the raise hand button option, which is available in the bottom. If you're on your phone or if you're on your laptop, you'll find it in the bottom. Also, one strict rule, please keep your questions limited to under 60 seconds. If you go beyond 60 seconds, we will have to mute you. So please keep it restricted to 60 seconds. Feel free to share your comments, observations in the chat section, but please keep it limited only to the public forum. Do not send it to everyone. Do not send it on the private forum. We will not be able to monitor those. Also, I'm going to request all of you to keep your cameras switched off during the course of the presentation so that the focus is only on our speakers. Gandhi sir, can I now request you to take over? So over to you.
Thank you very much, Arvind. A warm welcome to all the participants and our special guest today, Arvind Yogendra Yadav. Namaskar, Yogendra. And it's been very kind of you to agree to come here. I was worried 2 days back whether they'll arrest you. Fortunately, that didn't happen because that was the worry I had. Anyway, to introduce Yogendra would be silly. He has so many roles that it'd be impossible to cover all these roles. Psephologist, political thinker, political analyst, ethics guardian. I remember meeting Yogendra in Delhi when he was with his former political party. And he was mentioning, he said, it is difficult to figure out who to select because visibility is one criteria and that makes me feel very uncomfortable. I still recall that conversation with Yogendra in Delhi. He's also a political leader and a farmers leader now. And in Swaraj Abhiyan, some people ask me, they said, why Yogendra Yadav for RTI? And the reason is, his is the only political party in the country which follows RTI, which subjects itself to RTI, has a public information officer. Though by law, he probably does not fall in a public authority, he has committed himself to that. And he does not tout about it. 6 political parties of India, major political parties, have been declared as public authorities and must follow the law. They have not challenged the decision. But lawlessly, they are refusing to follow the law. So therefore, Yogendra Yadav, a special thanks to you for setting a trend which we hope in coming days will become the trend in the whole country for all political parties to follow. Let's start with you are an author of books on democracy and a very well-known thinker on this subject. I would invite you to share your thoughts of linking RTI with democracy. I think it's a very important factor for a democracy. Without RTI, I do not believe a democracy exists. But we'd like to hear your views about this.
Thank you, Shailesh. And thanks for all these kind words, very, very generous words. And actually, you mentioned someone asked you why Yogendra Yadav. Honestly, that would have been my question too. Why me on RTI? I'm not an RTI expert, and it's very kind of you to think that I have anything meaningful to say. Possibly, I do on the first one, the first question that you have asked. But allow me a little 10-second indulgence. Today happens to be a very special day for me personally, because this is 17 years ago. My guru, Kishan Patnaik, passed away on this very day, 29th of September. And you know that little sketch that you see at the back? I don't know if you can see it properly. This sketch, that's the only photograph I've ever kept in any of our places. And that's Kishanji. So whatever I've learned about politics, about society, much of that draws from him. So thank you for scheduling this talk on a special day, though that's not what you intended, but it so happened. The relationship between RTI and democracy. You know, Shaileshji, we all say we love democracy. We all almost worship democracy because we live in an age where you cannot speak against democracy. Democracy is the holy cow. Everyone worships it. Now, worshipping democracy can mean two very different things. One is to value and worship the idea of democracy, the values of democracy, to say, well, everyone must, that human beings are capable of taking decisions on their own, and everyone's opinion should be valued, of the people, for the people, by the people, whichever definition you use. But the second meaning of democracy is a certain mechanism, which is you hold elections after every 4 or 5 years, people get elected, they get to take decisions, there is a procedure for voting, and so on and so forth. We call both things democracy. And we somehow expect the second to deliver the first. We expect that if we hold elections every 4 or 5 years, if the elections are fair, that is to say, if counting is fair, etc., then the government which would come to power would really work for the interest of the people. We never care to stop and ask why. Why do we expect this mechanism, a humanly designed mechanism, to somehow deliver all these beautiful things that we call the values of democracy? And as a matter of fact, there are not very many reasons to suspect so, to think so. Because democracy works under, it's a very long chain of assumptions. The assumption is that every human being knows what his or her interests and needs are, that they are capable of not only understanding it, that they can articulate it, that when they articulate it, someone would be there to listen to them, and that political parties will compete with each other to give them the best deal, as it were, to use the market language. And then the one who offers them the best deal would win. And that group, party, company, whatever you might call it, that would survive as long as they offer the best deal to the customer called the voter. Now, this is the broad assumption. I'm deliberately using a market simile. Maybe your viewers would be more used to this, but this has been a very classic theory, that democracy is like market, that that voters are like consumers. Consumers are kings. They decide, they know, they take decisions, and they throw out those who can't serve them. Looks lovely on paper. But in reality, the whole business depends on certain assumptions. And the critical assumption is information. A critical assumption in the working of this mechanism is that everyone has access to equal information, has access to all the information, and has equal access to making their information be known to every other person. So it's a two-way street. I should have information and I should be able to send information. Unless we have a parity of that, this mechanism called democracy will not deliver the beautiful thing called democracy. And that is what we have witnessed in the last 70 years. So on paper, you have democracy. That's why people are, constantly disappointed with democracy, because they are unhappy with the mechanism. The mechanism, even when it works beautifully on paper, and assuming that there is no rigging of election, assuming that there is voting is correctly counted and so on. But it's a joke. It's a joke because if I'm unable to understand what the government has done for me, and if the only thing I can consume is this thing on television and WhatsApp University, that's the only thing I have to consume, then what basis do I have to make informed assessment? And conversely, if I can send my information only to one person, and there's another person who can send it to 100 crore people in 1 hour or 2 hours, then where is the parity? So the linkage is, and that's the point I wanted to make, that RTI is not merely a law passed by the government of India. It is critical to the very foundation of democracy. In that sense, I consider RTI not only to be a law, it's part of the architecture of our constitution. It was the missing link, which has been supplied. It's insufficient. It hasn't worked as well as it could have worked, but it is absolutely a vital link in democracy. Otherwise, democracy is no democracy. Simply because we have elections every 5 years doesn't make us democratic. No, you're muted, sir.
So you're on mute.
Beautifully said, Mr. Yadav. In fact, I call this a defective elective democracy. Because we have elections, we say we have a democracy, but it's a defective democracy, and you are 100% right. Let me point out the RTI Act has a specific provision in one of the exemptions. There are only 10 exemptions in the RTI Act in section 8.1. 8.1I has a very different kind of exemption. I just read that out. Notwithstanding anything contained in this act, there shall be no obligation to give any citizen cabinet papers, including records of deliberations of the councils of ministers, secretaries, and other officers. So that's the exemption. Provided that the decisions of councils of ministers, the reasons thereof, and the material on the basis of which the decisions are taken shall be made public after the decision has been taken and the matter is complete or over. This categorically means that, for example, when a bill is being discussed in the cabinet, while it is being discussed, information may not be shared. But once it is decided to present the bill in Parliament, information on how this decision was taken, what were the various views, must be shared with people. Because I believe the concept is that the citizen is the ruler, citizen is king. And therefore, it's not just members of Parliament who will discuss and debate the provisions, but the citizens also. Your comments on this, because this is a very important thing which is forgotten, which has not been followed by the earlier government also, nor by this government.
What is also forgotten is your own historic judgment on this about the fact that it needs to be followed. I'll take answer your question through an example. Take the 3 farmer laws. So the government of India, in the month of June 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, decides to do something historic for the farmers. I'm just using government's own language. They say they are doing something historic. So historic means it must have been a very significant legislation by the government's own statement. The government says we've done something which farmers needed for decades. We've done it. All right. They passed the ordinance they promulgate the ordinance in June 2020. This is made into a law in September 2020. Now, in December 2020, an RTI activist, Anjali Bharadwaj, writes to the government, to every possible department, saying, who did you consult? What was the consultative procedure before you enacted this law? Exactly fitting in what you said. So there must have been notes, there must have been background, there's everything. And the government said we had consulted not less, how much did they claim? They said they have consulted 93 lakh farmers. 93 lakh, just look at this. So Anjali Bharadwaj says, all right, I want to know the places of those consultations, minutes of the consultation, when the consultations were held, and so on and so forth. And what is the answer? No record, no record, no record. The same government that says that they've consulted 93 lakh farmers, no less. They can't even give you a list of 93 who may have been consulted. Zero background. And this, as you know, you would have known it longer. I got to know it only at that point. That actually, following the RTI Act, the government of India in 2014 actually had issued a pre-legislative consultative policy. Now, that's not a law, it's a policy. The policy clearly says that any law before it is made into a law will be published for at least 30 days. People's opinion will be sought, and so on and so forth. Now, forget the technicality. Now, look at the spirit of it. The government brings in an ordinance. Obviously, does not consult anyone. Doesn't feel the need to consult anyone. And mind you, Shailesh, this is a law which no farmer organization had ever demanded. There is a slight confusion about whether Shetkari Sangthan of Karnataka had demanded something similar in the 90s. But with that one exception, no farmer organization, not even BJP's own organization, not even an RSS organization had demanded these laws. So no farmer organization demands it. No farmer organization was consulted. Okay, you promulgate the laws. And you promulgate the laws, you obviously can bring in ordinance only on the ground that there is an emergency. So there was this grave emergency to do something historic in the month of June. Now, clearly, if it was so important and urgent, government would have done something with those laws? No, sir. Till September, the government does not issue a single order under these three ordinances. So you have this great emergency to bring in ordinances, but you don't issue a single order. You don't use these laws at all. Clearly, there was no emergency. In these 3 or 4 months, practically every farmers' organization says these laws are unacceptable. Please consult us. There should be consultation. There should be discussion. Not a single organization is consulted. Not even the RSS organization was consulted. RSS is a farmers' organization. And these are not allegations. They say this on television themselves. So I'm just quoting them. They say that they were not consulted. So from ordinance, we go into a law. On the floor of the parliament, parliamentarians say, please send it to a committee. Let these laws be examined by a committee. No, they cannot be sent to a committee. And then you know the Rajya Sabha fiasco, when actually even the voting does not take place. A member stands up, as is the law in the House, even if a single member wants a division, and division means that every single parliamentarian's vote is recorded in writing. It was demanded, it was never given. And there's a widespread suspicion that if the vote was actually formally recorded, the government would have lost it. Now, this is the procedure through which these 3 laws are passed. I'm not getting into the merits of these laws. This is not the forum. I'm just getting into the procedure. Now, just look at the fraudulent procedure through which a law like these 3, the government itself says these are historic laws. Don't historic laws need even elementary consultation? None. And when asked in the record on RTI, no answer at all. Anjali Bharadwaj gets no, 0, not available, not in my purview, not in this, nothing at all. Now, this is the state of affairs. And I'm glad when you were in that chair, you passed orders about implementing this. But allow me to say that kind of Information Commission's role, which was to be a guardian of this law, hasn't quite been followed up. And allow me to also say something which is probably controversial. But in the last instance, the courts were meant to be the guardian of this law. The courts are meant to be the guardians of every law. This law in particular. Allow me to say that that's not a role the courts have actually played. So the promise of RTI hasn't quite been delivered, because of this. But then probably we can discuss that later.
Would you like to share some of your experiences on running a party where you have appointed a public information officer and opened yourself to right to information? We are all very curious to know about this. As I said, I was very pleasantly surprised, but this is a great thing.
You gave us a lot of credit, but honestly, the simple thing is, Shailesh ji, I think you were also there when the 6 parties refused to follow the commission's orders. I don't remember if you were there, but many of us were
No,
there.
I was not there.
You were probably in the commission. But we were there on the street protesting against it. So I protest against 6 political parties not implementing. This was 2012, early 2012 or so. I remember we were protesting in Jantar Mantar on why is it that political parties do not obey this order of the CIC. And after that, I'm involved in the group that found the political party. How can I not obey it? I mean, this would be utterly ridiculous, utterly duplicitous. So I don't think we deserve that much credit, but I'm really happy that my colleagues, remembered that. And I'm just reading out the provision. This is in our constitution. This is in the constitution of Swaraj India, the political party. This is Article 7H of our constitution. It simply says, there shall be right to information in the party available to party members as well as the general public. So anyone, you can ask me questions about Swaraj India's functioning, and I'm obliged to respond to that. Each state and national executive of the party shall appoint 1 or more public information officer from the members of the party in the area tasked with implementation of right to information. Procedures for implementation of RTI within the party as prescribed by the national executive through rules, etc. So it's part of our constitution. I'm happy to say that we did appoint public information officer previously. Now the entire, a new set of office bearers have come. We've had elections in our party, and I'm thankfully no longer the president. So a new team has taken over, a new PIO has been appointed. We are not that important as to be flooded with RTIs, but I do remember last year we received an RTI predictably from someone who was not very happy with our party and wanted to find out what exactly have we done with sexual harassment issues. Because that's the other thing that our party has. We have an internal complaints committee, a proper, just following the law on this. And we made available every single document. We get some other routine inquiries as well. Yes, so we've done that. As yet, I don't know if it's been that difficult, probably because we are too small. People don't bother about us, frankly, so that could be. But I said one thing, and I would wish to reiterate that, Shailesh. At that point, RTI activists didn't like what I said. I did say that RTI rules for a political party should be slightly tweaked, because political party is not a formal governmental organization. And keeping minutes, etc., because implementation of RTI requires a lot of paperwork to be regularly done. For political organizations, that degree of paperwork sometimes becomes difficult. I know many friends did not agree with me at that time. And on issues like granting tickets, which is one of the most critical issues for political parties. All I'm saying is that someone who has actually worked in political organizations should sit with RTI activists and devise rules which are specific to the kind of activity political parties do. Otherwise, I sometimes fear that political parties, even if they are brought within RTI ambit, they will keep destroying records. Or they will simply say, it was decided, A, B, C, D, considerations, etc. may never be recorded, things of that kind. But those are the things.
The limitation is RTI accesses records. So it does not give a person a chance to say, why did you do this? If you believe this is okay, fine. If you don't want to maintain minutes, that's also fine. But incidentally, as a core RTI person, I would object to the concept that everybody feels I'm different. The Reserve Bank feels I'm different. The judiciary feels I'm different. NGOs feel we are different. So that feeling that everybody is different is a very common feeling. And I think all of us must subject ourselves to the law, and the law works well. No organization, including the army, has gone down under because of the RTI, is the point I'd like to put across to you.
And the provision we have does not put any limit or any qualifications so far. I'm just
No,
thinking.
you have exemptions in the RTI Act, which will apply to you also if you are willing to be in RTI. Have you received many RTI applications by any chance? Any idea?
Sorry?
Any idea how many RTI applications you would have received? 2, 5, 10?
Below 10, that I can tell you.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Now I think you will receive more.
Certainly. Please go to our website, which needs a little updating. But yes, please feel free to send us inquiry. We would be happy to.
Linked to this transparency thing, the agitation you're leading right now, there are a lot of doubts about the financing of this. I understand it's a very complex kind of issue, but in terms of transparency, there are people who say all kinds of things. Maybe you'd like to throw some light on that.
Yeah, people say all kinds of things, and I actually would welcome any kind of investigation. You see, the difficulty is that transparency requires, first of all, a formal organization. Now, I know that in our farmers' organizations, keeping minutes is an alien idea. I've actually forced my colleagues for the last 6 months. For the first 3-4 months, we didn't do that, but we have this apex body of 9 members. So at least in the last 6 months, 6 or 7 months, I've now persuaded everyone that we should at least keep minutes of our meeting. At least we should at least record the decisions and keep minutes. So I mean, any transparency begins when you keep some records. And the difficulty is that for farmers' organizations, most of which are unregistered organizations, most of who do not have a bank account, most of who do not have any formal register, for them to then handle money becomes very difficult. So people have followed different practices. I'm only aware of the practices at my morcha. We have different morchas outside Delhi. For some, I've been in charge of the Shahjahanpur morcha. That's on the Delhi-Jaipur highway. And our rule was, we heard all these allegations and we wanted to stay away from all this. So one of the simple rules we made was we'll take money in kind, not in cash. So we would advertise, we would say, we need the following things. Sardi aa gayi hai, blankets ki zarurat hai. Now we need quilts, we need lakdi, we need whatever. And people would come and give it to us. And we would issue them a thank you note. Thank you, you've given it to us, etc. That was partly to circumvent this whole thing of receiving cash, which becomes a source of problem. Other morchas, I know they have been issuing receipts. About Singo Morcha, I do know that they have a system where they issue receipt. They keep record. The money is kept. There is a committee. At Singo Morcha, there is a committee in charge of receiving donations, and a separate committee in charge of sanctioning expenditure. So all that has happened. I do not know if they would meet very high standards of auditing and accounting. Incidentally, an audit has been conducted, I think 6 or 7 weeks ago. A certain internal audit was initiated. I haven't seen the audit report so far, but some kind of auditing is happening. What people don't realize is that in a movement like this, if we have local support, we actually don't need much money. So what's happening on my morcha? For example, I'll give you another example. The Tikri border. Milk is supplied by local farmers from Haryana. That comes free of cost. Vegetables are supplied. Someone comes and gives atta. At my border itself, we received so much boris of wheat that we actually had to return it. We said, no, we don't need more wheat, please, because that's the easiest thing for a farmer to give. They would come in a trolley and bring 10 boris of wheat with them. So we said, finally, please don't. And if you don't bring this, we need sabji, we need doodh. We don't need more wheat. So barter of that kind. If a agitation enjoys community support, that's the point I'm trying to make. If you enjoy community support, which is what this agitation does, then you don't need that much cash. That's how we've survived. But yes, whatever money has been received in cash should be accounted for. And I do hope my colleagues would do that.
Do you think whenever the report is available, it will be made public?
I don't know. I don't know as yet. Because I would want that to happen. But as I said, all this presupposes a system. And so we came to the morcha. We didn't know we are going to live here for 10 months. Everyone believed it was for 10 hours. Some of us thought it may go on for 10 days. No one came here for 10 months. So it is, all the systems are being put in place while we are running. I would be happy if we have a system in the first place where everything is being recorded. Number two, if the audit shows that things have been more or less done according to what the overall purpose was. For me, being able to make that audit public would be stage 3. Especially given an agitation where the government is keeping a watch on every single smallest thing. And the government is waiting to, and in fact, inventing scandals where none exist. So, but that's no reason to put a shroud. All I'm saying is that we're dealing with all these challenges on a real-time basis.
Transparency and RTI with respect to people's movements. You probably are aware of a lot of other movements, and I think you are also associated with some of the other movements. How important do you think they are for people's movements?
Of course it is to run. Look, it's not only for outsiders. What it does is that running an organization where certain things have to be made public, certain things have to be recorded. What it does is that it brings in a lot of internal discipline. So it's a very helpful thing. It's a very enabling thing. Otherwise, you simply say, ha, kar lenge, kabhi baad mein ho jayega, and then you keep neglecting some very critical things. So putting things in sunlight has enormous disinfecting functions. So sunlight is always a great idea.
What I meant is the usefulness of RTI for people's movements to take their movement further or to get information from government sources and use that effectively.
Not internally. One of the most important things that has happened that I have noticed, Shailesh, you would notice it from one end and I notice it from the other end. What I see is a fusion of RTI activism with ground activism. That is to say, earlier when the RTI movement just began, at that time, I used to notice a divide. There were the RTI activists and there were the ground activists who would get into dharna, pradarshan, memoranda, and so on. And they had a bit of contempt for RTI activities. ये तो कागज का काम करते हैं, घर बैठे करते हैं, AC drawing room में बैठ के करते हैं. That used to be the kind of thing. Now, for the last few years, I see a bit of fusion. There's a realization that both need each other. That in order, before you go for dharna, pradarshan, memoranda, you need information, and that would come through RTI. Another thing that I see very often, I don't know if that's your experience too, you go to a government officer and say, sir, ye information chahiye. So he would say, nahi, main de nahi sakta, पर आप ऐसा करो, आप मेरे को RTI डाल दो, फिर मैं आपको दे दूंगा. So the same officer tells you that, please bind my hands. मैं वैसे दे दूंगा, तो नाराज हो जाएंगे, फिर ऊपर से मुझे फोन आ जाएगा. But आप RTI डाल दीजिए, फिर मुझे देना पड़ेगा. So lots and lots. So it's actually helped bureaucracy as well. Lots of very good civil servants have used it by inviting it against themselves and then by releasing information. So it's been a great enabler thing. And to my mind, RTI has not only for social movements, it's one of the best things that has happened to our democracy in the last 20 years. These are not years where our democracy has fared particularly well. There are hundreds of areas where our democracy has gone down, has taken steps back. But this was one very big step forward. And what it has done, I think the initial expectation that once you set in motion, you would have thousands and lakhs of people who, for various reasons, ranging from philanthropy to kundak, who would wish to use it. And that has indeed happened. You know, I remember Arunadi, when the act was only 1 year old. Then some bureaucrats had made an attempt to amend the act and basically to scuttle it at that stage. And that point, I remember Arunadi saying, योगेन, अगर ये 2 साल और रह जाए एक्ट, किसी तरह से इसको 2 साल और बचा ले, फिर कोई इसको बंद नहीं कर सकेगा. And how right she was. You know, now you can scuttle it through all kinds of, you can circumvent it, you can do all kinds of delays and so on, which is very frustrating. But I think it will be very difficult for any government to actually roll it back altogether. And that is the strength. So it's RTI activism has become part of our normal activism now. For our farmers movement, for every second or third day, someone send me, sir, आपने टीवी पे वो बोला था, मैंने actually ये चीज RTI से निकाल ली है. You know, so a lot of that keeps happening now all the time. So which is so lovely to see.
Before we go into the interaction with the participants and answering their questions, one last question, Yogendra ji. 10 years from now, you are somebody who forecasts a lot of things, including election results at one point in time. Your forecast, what will Indian democracy and RTI look like? Both are linked, in my opinion. 10 years from now, where do you think this would be? Where would India be?
पहले तो आपको डायलॉग दे दो, फिर जवाब दे दो. The dialogue which I keep using is कि पिछले जन्म में मैं भविष्य बताने का काम करता था. अब इस जन्म में मैं भविष्य बनाने का काम करता हूं. So no more, you know, future telling, etc. You see, as you rightly said, the future of RTI is inextricably linked with the future of our democracy. And I wish I could say nice things about the future of our democracy. Honestly, Shailesh, I'm actually very concerned. In the book that I published last year, that's called Making Sense of Indian Democracy, that came out a year ago exactly. In that, I've said that, look, let's face it, the first Republic of India is over. The Republic of India that was inaugurated in 1950 was over in around 2019. Someone could say 2014, someone could say 2019. It's over. The Second Republic is yet to be born. We don't know what that Second Republic would look like. Would it look like Putin's Russia? Would it look like Erdogan's Turkey? Would it look like Mahendra Paksha's Sri Lanka? Or would it look like the kind of democracy we wanted? You know, so a lot of people would say, but, you know, why are you saying this, Mr. Yadav? You know, you are discussing with Shailesh Gandhi, you're openly talking things about Supreme Court and so on and so forth. So why do you worry about democracy? My answer is, my dear friends, democracy is not killed in a traditional way in the 21st century. 20th century style of killing democracy was very simple. Someone in a uniform would go to television studio or a radio station, announce that martial law has been imposed, democracy is suspended, and everyone knew democracy is over. When I was a child in 1975, I heard Mrs. Gandhi go on radio in 1975, and I knew from tomorrow onwards, I would not get a newspaper which would carry the news, you know, which was unfavorable to the government. So it was neat and clean. 20th century methods of killing in democracy were transparent, if I were to use that word. 21st century is the ways of killing democracy are very different. You invoke democracy in order to kill democracy. You worship democracy in order to destroy it. You use democratic institutions in order to kill democracy. And this is not just India. That's exactly what's happening in Russia. This is happening in Turkey. This is happening in so many countries of the world. And I think we must get sensitized to this fact that, you know, there's a book called How Democracies Die. And that book, it doesn't have a word about India. So, you know, no one needs to be alarmed or concerned. The book is about the US, about other countries of the world. And it says, these are the ways in which democracies die. When you first of all, control the umpires. Then you change the rules of the game. Then you put limits on the players. Then you exclude a few critical players from the playing field. This is how it happens. And I see lots of signs of that in our country. So I'm worried. I'm worried about the future of democracy in our country. And I really think that the battle of the next 2 or 3 years is the battle to save democracy in this country. And I also fear, because while I see the challenge coming from the ruling party, I do not see the opposition having the capacity to build resistance to that. And honestly, the only opposition I see is on the street. And parliament, there is formally an opposition in the parliament, but I don't see that opposition doing any opposition, meaningful, effective opposition. So in this country, unfortunately, the opposition and resistance is only on the street. That worries me. I wish I could say those lovely things about, democracy is there, healthy, we would go from one step to the other, etc. All I can say is the history of democracies all over the world tells us that contestation is critical to democracy. The story of democracy is never a smooth, lovely stories of constitutions being implemented, things going from one step to the other. Democracies require contestation, struggle, resistance. Democracy requires people to come on the street to defend democracy. We Indians got it cheap. We got democracy without struggling for it. I must say, this is harsh. But, people in Nepal who had to struggle for their democracy, they understand the value of it. In Pakistan, they have had to occasionally struggle for it. In Bangladesh, they've had to struggle for it. So they understand the value of democracy. We Indians got it free. Constitution mila, azadi mili, saath mein democracy bhi mil gayi. So we've actually never fought for it. And emergency, we got it, although we may like to write great stories about how Indians resisted emergency. But the fact is that Indira Gandhi goofed it up. Otherwise she could have extended it. So we would now have to struggle. And to my mind, that's not such a bad idea, that we have to occasionally struggle for democracy. So I see the future of our democracy not primarily through the lens of the constitution, laws, courts, and these independent institutions, most of which have already been very seriously compromised. I see the future of democracy through struggles on the street, be it the struggle for equal citizenship, which was anti-CAA, be it the struggle of the farmers on the ground, or be it the next major struggle, which I think is likely to happen on the issue of unemployment.
Thank you very much, Yogendraji. This has been a great evening. And before we open up to the participants, I'll make a small wish and a good wish, wishing you luck, wishing you retain your ideals and utopia and your utopian ideas, and hoping that if you come to power somewhere at some point in time, you will not forget RTI, like a very good friend of mine has today, once in power. All the best. Arvind?
Yeah. Ma'am wanted to say something.
May I start by asking the first question, if you don't mind? So, Yogendraji, I'm sure you've done a lot of thinking about this. Today, we live in times when we have unprecedented amount of, for want of a better word, transparency. Information is available. You have Google giving you everything. Every individual can publish and be heard if he wants to. How he spreads what he says is different. At the same time, you have extreme polarization, indoctrination of a kind, and people closing their minds. I'm sure, having set up a political party, you've done a lot of thinking about this. Would you sort of tell us your views on it?
You're right. There's a lot of information, but you need frames to receive, capture, and categorize those information. Otherwise, information by itself means nothing. You can keep reading the classified advertisement in Times of India that tells you nothing. So it's about having frames. And I think something has happened in our country. Where did we get those frames to make sense of the information that we were receiving? In our country, those frames did not come from academic thinking. The frames came from political life itself. In that sense, our country is so very different from European tradition. In Europe, if you look at the great thinkers of Europe of the last 5 or 6 centuries, most of them had something or the other to do with the world of academia. Go back to Hobbes, people like Marx, people like Weber. Now, these are people who have, if you look at the entire tradition, Western social theory, it's a tradition of detached reflections, people who are away, they are not actually in day-to-day politics. In our country, on the other hand, if you look at the last 150 years, last 200 years, much of the serious reflection about society has not come from detached thinkers. It has come from the participants. Most of our great thinkers are also great activists. They are actually in the thick of it. Now, that tradition, which you can broadly call modern Indian thought, beginning with Raja Ram Mohan Roy to recent times, that tradition provided us a resource to make sense of the information about politics and public life. It came in the form of ideologies. It came in the form of, lectures, speeches, whatever. I think something happened to that. I've dramatically called it the death of modern Indian political thought. Around 1970s and 80s, suddenly this frame collapsed. So in the shadow of independence movement for the first 20, 30 years, we had modern Indian political thought that still continued. Dr. Ambedkar wrote some of his best books after independence. You had Ram Manohar Lohia, Jayaprakash Narayan. In many ways, Lohia was the last great political thinker of our country. And in some ways, I like to believe that Kishan Patnaik was, in a sense, just the last tail of that tradition, which ended in 2004 in this case. I think that tradition collapsed. And as a result of which, we have news, information, but we don't have frames to make sense of it, which has led to a very poor quality of political judgment. When I look at politics today, Sucheta, what strikes me is not merely the fact that there are no ethics and morals. That's all right. That's happened in politics all over the world at different points in time. What strikes me is the sheer lack of political judgment of the top leaders. Some of our top political leaders have very poor judgment of politics, and I suspect their judgment is so poor because the frame through which they could make judgments has collapsed. And in that sense, I would say something which would irritate my professional colleagues. I think the rise of political science, the rise of academic understanding of politics has been the biggest tragedy for our understanding of politics. Shifting from political theory being done by practicing politicians to political theory being done by political scientists based in the university. This has been an unmitigated disaster for our country because our academic frames are not reflective of what's happening in our country. They are broadly about what's happening in Western universities. But anyway, I'm already digressing. So the broad point I was making is that, yes, the frames have collapsed. The quality of political judgment has declined. And therefore, what we need are people who can make sense of the world of politics. And one thing that I learned from Kishanji, was he would look at everyday events of politics and put it in a larger frame. This is what is needed. This is what is so desperately missing right now. And the disappearance of ideologies from our politics, while in one way has been a good thing that you don't go by doctrines and certainties, but in another way, it has made us so disoriented. That is the real problem. I don't know if answers your question, but that's the first thing.
Arvind, who has raised hands? I'm not able to figure out.
We have Sanjay Shirudkar, sir, who's raised his hand. So can I request him to unmute? Sir, I'm going to request if you can ask your question in under 60 seconds. That would be really helpful, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Democracy, RTI, transparency. That is my concern. I have exposed many scams in toll tax field. My question is basically, we get no answers, no copies as far as PMO and cabinet secretary is concerned, and cabinet approvals and decisions. To be specific, the PM case, of course, then 6 airports to Adani takeover of Mumbai airport, and many examples like that. Whenever you ask, decision has been taken, project has been operational, project has been done, a lot of things, still the approval on what grounds has been taken. I've used RTI, exercise RTI for more than 10,000 times, but experience with cabinet secretariat at PMO is very, very, pathetic. Is this a transparency? That is the question.
Sanjay ji, it is not. It is a mockery of what the RTI was meant to be. It is a mockery of Constitution and the law. And the trouble, you see, this is what is so unique about this particular regime. Earlier regimes were no great shakes. Congress brought in RTI, but their officers and their ministers were trying to circumvent it all the time. So they were not true to the spirit. What is, and that's the distinction I draw between adharma and vidharma. Adharma is when you say, yes, this is good, I'm trying to do it, and you actually do exactly the opposite. Vidharma is when you brazenly stand up and say, why should I do it? I will not do it. This is the difference I see between the previous regimes and this one. The previous regimes were also cutting corners, cheating and denying and playing all the games. But we now have a regime which thrives on lies. And where in the earlier regimes, at the top, they would try to maintain a semblance of, proper order, So, and going below, things would start going bad and they would deteriorate into absolute the worst nightmares. In this regime, the worst begins from the top. PM care is such a, PM care, what more scandal can you expect in a country like this? So here you have thousands of crores of public money being transferred to a fund, which we now realize is not a public fund at all. So about which you cannot ask questions. So that kind of brazenness could not have happened earlier. And that to me is the distinctive hallmark of this regime. That here lies are concentrated at the top. And if you press further, they would turn around and say, "Kisne kaha tha? Kyun de? Nahi dete? Kya karna hai? Jo karna hai kar lo." That's the difference. And this is what is leading to. So once you get this signal from the top, then of course everyone knows what is to be done. That to me is the real problem. So you're absolutely right. And the problem is not merely the fact that many decisions get taken at PMO, but the important thing is that the signal goes from PMO to everyone. Ye kar lo, koi farak nahi padta. Dekhi jayegi. That's the problem.
Arvind, next.
We have a Mr. Jagdish Alimare. Mr. Jagdish, please unmute, and I'm going to request you again to keep your question under 60 seconds.
हाँ यस सर, मैं बचपन में जब 10 साल का था तो योगेंद्र जी के जो चुनावी जब समय पर डीडी नेशनल पर आते थे तो बहुत ही मुझे अच्छा लगता था उनका सुनना। तो बहुत ही अच्छे तरह से चुनावी नतीजों का समीक्षण करते थे। 10 साल से मैं बचपन से उनका बहुत बड़ा फैन हूँ, क्योंकि योगेंद्र जी की जो बातें हैं वो बहुत ही सटीक और बहुत ही अच्छी होती है। तो योगेंद्र जी, मुझे पूछना है कि अभी जो चल रहा है आरटीआई के जो भी एक्टिविस्ट को मारा जा रहा है, या उनका महाराष्ट्र में तो बहुत ज्यादा लोगों को मार दिया गया है, उसी के साथ साथ जो भी करप्शन शो हो रहा है उस पे एक जो सॉल्यूशन है वो टेक्नोलॉजी हो सकता है, और उसके साथ साथ आरटीआई जो एक्टिविस्ट है उनको सेफ्टी कैसा हो सकता है। अगर किसी ने भी अगर एप्लीकेशन डाला तो उनको एक क्रिमिनल के तौर पर देखा जाता है। जो भी ब्यूरोक्रेट्स और पॉलिटिशियंस मिलकर जो भी कॉमन सिटीजन्स है उनकी आवाज दबाने का काम चालू है। धन्यवाद योगेंद्र।
जगदीश भाई, पहले तो शुक्रिया, आपने मेरे को मेरी बुजुर्गियत का एहसास दिलवाया। बाल मेरे सफेद हो गए तो जब मुझे आजकल मैं कई बार देखता हूँ शैलेश जी कि कई लोग जिनके सर पे बाल नहीं होते मुझे आके कहते हैं कि बचपन से मैं आपको देखता आ रहा हूँ। तो मुझे अपनी बुजुर्गियत का बहुत गंभीर एहसास होता है। नहीं जगदीश भाई, आपने जो सवाल उठाया बहुत गंभीर सवाल है और मुझे नहीं लगता इसका कोई टेक्निकल सॉल्यूशन है। देखिए, आप टेक्निकल सॉल्यूशन इतना कर सकते हैं कि आप किसी के आइडेंटिटी को मास्क कर दें कुछ समय के लिए, ये सब कर दें, लेकिन हिंदुस्तान में कुछ भी छुपा हुआ नहीं रहता। और असली बात ये है कि जब तक आरटीआई एक्टिविस्ट को कमीशन और कोर्ट्स प्रोटेक्शन नहीं देंगे तब तक कैसे होगा। ये तो देखिए, ये बिल्कुल सत्ता एक ठेकेदार है। अब जैसे मैं आपको बताऊं, हमारा एक साथी है जो हरियाणा में ये स्टोन क्रशर्स हैं, उनके खिलाफ उसने एक अभियान चलाया हुआ है कि स्टोन क्रशर्स हैं, लोगों की हेल्थ खराब हो रही है और जो परमिटेड एरियाज हैं वहां पे नहीं है। उसने आरटीआई का इस्तेमाल किया और उसने बाकायदा दिखा दिया। 72 स्टोन क्रशर्स महेंद्रगढ़ जिले में बंद हो गए। अब जिन लोगों की, जिसका मतलब है करोड़ों का धंधा बंद हो गया है। अब जिनके करोड़ों का धंधा है उनके पास अब दो ऑप्शन है। एक तो चुपचाप से इस बात को स्वीकार कर लें कि भाई चलो आरटीआई में हुआ, हमारी बात झूठ निकली, अब हम धंधा बंद करके चलते हैं। लेकिन हिंदुस्तान में तो ऐसा होता नहीं है ना, वो अब तमाम तरीके निकालेंगे। और मेरे को बहुत चिंता होती है उस अपने साथी के बारे में कि पता नहीं इनमें से कौन उसके पीछे पड़ जाए, उसको धमकियां भी मिल चुकी हैं। ऐसे में जब तक हमारा कानून व्यवस्था उस आरटीआई एक्टिविस्ट के साथ खड़ी नहीं, जब तक जो पूरा संस्थागत व्यवस्था है, चाहे वो कानून की हो, सत्ता की हो, वो उसके साथ खड़ी नहीं होती, और जब तक पूरे देश का आरटीआई समाज मिलके उनके साथ खड़ा नहीं, तब तक इसका रास्ता नहीं है। तो टेक्निकल सॉल्यूशंस नहीं है, ये संघर्ष है, ये शक्ति का संघर्ष है। और इस संघर्ष में दो तीन ही रास्ते हैं। एक तो कि हम एक दूसरे के साथ सॉलिडेरिटी बनाएं। अगर बिहार में किसी को होता है आरटीआई एक्टिविस्ट को, पूरे देश के लोग खड़े होकर उसके बारे में हल्ला करें, मीडिया उसकी बात को सामने लेके आए और सीआईसी और कोर्ट्स इसको डिफेंड करें। और मेरे को डर यही होता है कि इस सब के बारे में कोर्ट्स की भूमिका बहुत अच्छी नहीं है। इसके बारे में मुझे बहुत दुख है, डर है, और उसी के चलते ये मूवमेंट उतना तेजी से बढ़ नहीं पा रहा है। लेकिन आपकी चिंता बिल्कुल जायज़ है, और ये आरटीआई को आगे बढ़ने में सबसे बड़ा एक चिंता ये है और होनी चाहिए।
You get? Yes, Arvind, next.
Yeah, Mr. Ashok Dhabai, can you please unmute?
Yes, Arvind ji, thank you, Yogesh ji, Yogendra ji. I fully agree with you, but the point is where we RTI activists go and CIC is not supporting their cause. In one of the case, I wanted to see the file, and CPI is rejected without advancing any exemption under RTI Act. And CIC say, no, don't use this forum. You better go to court. It is a disciplinary proceeding in life and liberty question. And just I attended a meeting and he simply said, he is very well right. Because he has gone through disciplinary proceedings, he has not shown the file, so I have no right. If this is the attitude of CIC, then where will go? I said, give any exemption. It is, I am just seeking information only. RT is a separate, different court, is nothing, no nexus with the disciplinary proceedings. I want to see the file. They are not giving me papers. He said, no. I think you have gone through the disciplinary proceedings. Better you go to High Court and use it. I am rejecting your application. This is the position. How you will save the RTA, sir? This is the stand of CIC, highest authority, who is not bothering about suo disclosure at 4(1)(d), and he is also protecting these people.
I completely
Gandhi ji.
agree. I wish I had an answer. I wish I had a constructive answer. And if Shailesh ji can add to that answer, I would be very happy. But Ashok Bhai, the question you've asked is an absolutely valid question. And my own sense is that over the years, in increasingly so, the Information Commission has let this law down. What one had expected was that with the passage of time, systems will become more stringent, penalties would be imposed, Commission would start asking harder questions. On the contrary, what we have seen is a reverse movement over the years. I don't know if Shailesh ji agrees with that, and he's actually more competent than I am to answer this question. But I mean, I wish I could actually give you a very hopeful answer. To my mind, in the last instance in democracy, things get resolved not inside the four walls of an institution, but in the last instance, they get resolved on the street. So what we need is another movement on the street. First, there was a movement to secure RTI. Now there has to be a movement to actually secure its implementation. And I suspect that in the last instance, that battle will have to be fought on the street. Basically, governments and courts and information commission have to be shamed into doing this. That cannot be an individual case. That cannot be one single petition, and there's no shortcut to it. It has to be collective action by all those who believe in right to information. So all I can say is, welcome to the street.
Arvind, the last question now.
Yeah, so one last question from Ms. Aparna Joshi. Ms. Joshi, can you unmute? Ms. Joshi?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am, keep your question restricted to under 60 seconds.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. As discussed earlier by one person, I wanted to ask that what is the safety, what is the degree of safety a person will have when making an RTI application? Because I am a owner of an ancestral property, and which we are trying to develop or either sell it off. And I wanted to make RTI application, but people around me are saying, no, it's not safe for you. It's not safe for your life. So then what is the use of a RTI or a CIC or whatever you would say, if I cannot make use of that?
Aparna ji, my own sense is that those who are advising you that it's not safe for your life are probably overestimating. I think you should go in for RTI. I think the things have not yet reached a point where a simple RTI becomes a threat to life. Hundreds of thousands of people file RTIs every day. So I would suggest that yes, you, in my sense, I don't know the exact local situation. To my mind, you can and should go for RTI. The cases that we were discussing earlier are the ones which involve huge commercial or political interest, where things go against the RTI activist and where persecution and all kinds of things take place. But from what you describe, your case doesn't look like that. But maybe Shailesh has more advice to offer on that.
Aparna ji, if I may chip in, there is a very simple device which is open to most people and a lot of people use it. If you feel threatened, ask somebody from another city to file the RTI application and get the information. That's a very simple device that is used. And there are methods of safeguarding RTI activists, and we take it up at some other forum. Thank you very much, Yogendra ji. This has been a lovely evening, and you've spent a lot of time and shared your thoughts without any hesitation, without holding back, which is something which I think a lot of us know you for. Thanks to Yogendra ji, thanks to all the participants. We'll keep these conversations going and hopefully making RTI more stronger. Do we need to go to the streets? Maybe Yogendra ji is now becoming an expert at going to the streets. He might be able to help in some manner. All the best and take care, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Shailesh ji. Thank you, Sucheta, and thanks to Moneylife Foundation for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.